Hello there, how you doing? This is Flagel here, and today I'm going to be making a video that's not only going to touch on some Blu-rays that I've bought recently, but also give a shout out to a channel which I think is worth your time. Now, I've never done a shout out before, but I'll give a good attempt at it. So, my opinions on YouTube's quality of videos in general has kind of went on decline, to be honest. I feel a lot of videos tend to focus on being as sporadic and as shouty as possible, and just it seems that a lot of people feel that the general population really needs something loud every 2 seconds just to keep their attention. Like, it's pretty sad. So I just feel like there's not a lot of channels out there that just take the time whilst also at the same time being very interesting. Now, even though I'm not a big fan of vlogs and such like that, like I would never be interested in seeing someone, making a vlog video about them buying a bottle of ketchup at Sainsbury's, at the same time, I feel that very informative, in-depth and long videos can be both very interesting, but at the same time quite relaxing, and something worth to put on when you're, sorting a lot of things out. I suppose kind of like a podcast in a way, only in video format. So that's where I wanted to give a shout out to Daisuke Beppu, who is a gentleman that I've came across about 3 or 4 months ago, I believe, when I was getting into what's known as the Criterion Collection, which I could talk about, in a lengthy amount, but basically, if you're not sure what the Criterion Collection is, it's basically a home media company that have been going on since, I believe, the 80s, that kind of pride themselves in being able to distribute films that are of the highest quality, both video and audio wise, as possible, and they always like to put on an array of different sort of extras and such like that on the DVDs and Blu-rays that they release. Usually a bit on the pricey front. You'll probably think that when you first check out their releases, but a lot of people will probably agree that it's worth it for the price, especially if you're purchasing a film that's one of your personal favourites, because generally you can't get a better release of that film anywhere else if you buy that particular version if it's on the Criterion Collection. I've been getting into it recently because they've just started coming over to the UK within the last few years. I think the first time they were releasing it over here in the UK was in 2016. I think there's only about 50 to 60 releases, which does sound like a lot, but when you consider that next week the Criterion Collection are going to announce their 1000th release, we're a bit behind here in the UK, but at the same time, I'm looking forward to them releasing eventually a lot of classic films that still aren't actually over here on Blu-ray format, when they eventually are released here. And at the same time, when I have a bit of money, I'll enjoy purchasing some of my personal favourites that are going to get released on the Criterion Collection. I need to get 12 Angry Men, which is one of my favourites, which is released over here, and soon enough I think Do the Right Thing will be coming out soon, which I think the Blu-ray release for that is pretty much spot on anyways, but I need to check out the extras and such like that and see if it might be worth buying. But getting a bit off topic there, like I say, I could talk about ages about the Criterion Collection. I wanted to address Daisuke Beppu because this gentleman is a person who, like I say, I've came across a couple of months ago, and he is exactly the sort of channel that I'm looking for and ticks all the boxes in terms of actually making very interesting and informative videos at a good length. Now, the guy himself, just a very genuinely sweet and honest and just just a clearly passionate guy about just films in general. But he's just such a nice bloke who clearly, when he gets so interactive with the audience, has a clear love for his fans and such, which I completely have to tip my hat to. In this day and age, like I say, when it seems that a lot of people are just making videos for money, and clickbait and then all that rubbish with thumbnails, he's just none of that whatsoever. Just a down-to-earth, honest guy who just makes generally great videos on like a daily basis as well. So I know that my audience that I've attracted throughout the years is themed around music, but if you have a big interest in films, you've got to check out Daisuke's channel. You really do. So that's just a shout out that I really wanted to give. Please not only check out his videos if you want to get interested in the films from the past to the present, films from overseas to wherever you live, he'll cover them, because he's just such a knowledgeable person in that sort of field, you know. But like I say, I've recently been getting into a lot of films recently, so discovering Daisuke was kind of like a blessing. He's given me personally a really good selection of recommendations of films that otherwise I wouldn't have heard about. One, for example, is a film by an Australian filmmaker called Peter Weirs, made a film called Picnic at Hanging Rock, which was a fantastic atmospheric sort of mystery film. Really great. I also found him recommending a film called 4 Months, 3 Weeks and 2 Days, which was a great kind of on the edge but important film as well. But yeah, not only does he make these great videos which can go on for hours, but are still really detailed, not in a bad way, going on for a while, but also the live streams are great too. The audience that he's attracted just all see him as down to earth and as friendly as him. So if you ever catch out his live stream when he's doing it live, it's worth kind of interacting with the people, because they just all seem very passionate about films as much as him. And at the same time, you know, if you're just getting your foot in the door with films in general, I'm sure they'll all give you some really good recommendations. So if you're watching this, mate, as well, Daisuke, keep up the great work. And I'll also, if you happen to watch this, I want to give you a film recommendation. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before. It's a film that I don't think was very popular when it came out. It's from 1989, I believe, and it's directed by a gentleman who I believe only ever made one film, which is this one. I'm trying to have a look in the back to see if it's Bob Balaban, I think it's pronounced, and it's the film called Parents, which is an extremely black comedy horror film that I really enjoyed. I forgot how I stumbled upon it, but I'm interested to see if you've seen it before, and if you haven't, then I'd really recommend checking it out, because it's very unique in a good way. Also touching upon that, I mentioned in a comment to him that I was getting into a director called well, I'd say he needs no introduction, but for people who are maybe just getting, you know, to grips with sort of world cinema in general, I don't know if you've ever heard of a gentleman called Yasujiro Ozu, who made some, well, extremely important films in Japan. Namely, if I can find it here, this film called Tokyo Story, which has become one of my favourite films of all time, and I couldn't sing his praises enough. I highly, highly recommend it. But anyways, I was mentioning to Daisuke that I was getting very close to collecting all of the BFI, which is the British Film Institute's releases of Yasujiro Ozu's films on DVD and Blu-ray, and I wanted to give him a bit of an update. So, if you can see here, that is all of the Blu-rays that they've ever released, and also this is their DVDs that they've released as well, which cover his earlier films too. These two especially cover films that he made in the early 30s, and these are 3 films which I think also cover sort of later films, especially a film called Early Spring, which is known as an absolute classic, and Tokyo Twilight, which is supposed to be one of his darker films, which I look forward to watching. And recently, and this is me really trying to collect all of the releases, there's this which I found at CEX. It's released by Artificial Lion, and it's called Japanese Masters. And on here, it has 4 films. Now, these 4 films are actually covered by 2 different directors. I'm not even going to bother trying to pronounce one of the directors' names, because I would totally butcher it. But he released what is known as a real classic called The Life of Oharu, which I'm looking forward to watching. There's also a film by the same director, which I don't think is as well known, but I'm sure is really good too, which is this one, The Lady of Musashino. But why I got this was because these guys on this box set released 2 other films by Ozu. One of them is Floating Weeds, which I know is also on the Masters of Cinema releases, but it also contains this, The End of Summer, which has not been published on the British Film Institute's catalogue of their releases of Ozu's films. So I am really trying to get everything as possible in terms of finding all of his films that are released over here in the UK. Now there's one final DVD that I do need that I think will cover everything, which there's a distributor called Tartan Cinema, who, again talking about Japan, release what they call Asia Extreme, which is where they've released films like The Ring, A Bittersweet Life, Battle Royale, you know, really gritty but great films. And they released a box set which has 2 films by Ozu. One of them is, I believe, what's it called again? Flavoured tea over rice or something, green tea over rice or something like that. And another film which totally escapes is what it's called. But these 2 films again are only available on this release, and it's very rare. I think it usually sells for about £40 odd, which is quite a lot for just 2 films. But if I ever see it for a bit cheaper, then I'm totally going to snap it up, and I will be pretty happy to say that by that point I'll have a really good collection. I mean, even these have like 2 films on one, so I think by that point I would probably end up having nearly 30 films by them, so not bad, eh? So on top of that, I wanted to kind of do a bit of a collection update, but it's not CDs, it's actually films that I've gotten recently on the Amazon Prime sale. Now, long story short, I don't need to go into too much detail, but basically my grandfather passed away recently. My brother found a wallet of his. He kept multiple amounts of wallets. He was a very interesting but lovely man, and he found a wallet that had money in it, quite a bit. And my brother decided to distribute this money around my family, my cousins and my sister and brother. And so I got a bit of this money, and I thought, well, why not treat myself to a few films on the Amazon Prime sale? So these are the films that I've gotten. And you know, I haven't watched a TV show since, I'd say, pushing 8 months, probably even longer. So I'm pretty happy to think that all of these films, all of these Blu-rays are all TV shows. So it's kind of making up for it. And I'll quickly show you them. Actually 3 of them are all animes, and I'm a complete novice with that sort of thing. I only have watched a few Studio Ghibli films. There's a few films that I've watched which are known as kind of classics, like Akira and Perfect Blue, and I've also watched 1 or 2 anime TV shows. One of them is Serial Experiments Lane, which is very interesting, haunting, scary, psychological, but really good. And another one which is called Paranoia Agent, which is great too. So these are ones that I've picked up recently. So one of them is Ergo Proxy, which I've heard is really good. Supposed to be quite dark, sci-fi, sort of philosophical. One of them is this one, I think it's pronounced Fooly Cooly, which is supposed to be sort of an adventure comedy. Supposed to be really good. And the one that I'm really looking forward to watching is this one called Samurai Champloo, which I know it's directed by the people who made Cowboy Bebop, which I know is known as probably the best anime TV show, which I've never seen. But the reason why I wanted to check this out, and is the reason why I stumbled across it actually. I love my hip hop, and I heard about a gentleman called I don't even know how to pronounce it. Is it New Jabes? I'm not sure, but the guy is a legendary hip hop producer, and I found out that one of his releases is actually a soundtrack to this, and this is how I discovered this show. And I thought it's supposed to be excellent, and it's got a lot of again sort of links to hip hop. And I thought, well, I've never actually listened to this music that New Jabes, or however you pronounce it, has made on here. So I thought, I'm kind of getting, you know, two bits of enjoyment in the price of one. I'm watching a great show, hopefully, and at the same time I'll be enjoying some great music too. So really looking forward to that. Like, I've also got a show which I don't know how I've kept myself not from watching it earlier, because I'm such a huge fan of the trilogy, the film trilogy, but I've managed to pick up Ash vs Evil Dead series 1 to 3, and I can't wait to get stuck into this. Absolutely love the Evil Dead trilogy, especially Army of Darkness. I've never seen one episode of this, and I've heard a lot of great things about it, and I'm so excited to really get into this too. I don't know where it's gone. I was going to show you this one other thing that I got, which is a TV show. It is animation, but it's not anime. But I don't know where it's gone. It's disappeared, annoyingly. I've got the wrapper. I mean, that proves that I bought it, doesn't it? But it's Rocko's Modern Life, which I would talk a bit more extensively on, but I don't know where it's disappeared to, sorry. But it's a show that I used to watch infrequently when I was a kid, when it used to air on Nickelodeon quite late. And I feel it's just going to be one of those things where I'm going to see bits of it and be like, oh yeah, I remember that. Oh yeah, I remember that. But not remember anything that actually happens. But I've been watching a few of those episodes and they're great. So again, really looking forward to getting into that too. So that's my recent pickups. I've got a few Criterion Collection films coming through the post. Yesterday I got this one, The Life Aquatic with Steve Zissou. There's another one that's coming through the post any minute now probably, which is Midnight Cowboy. And overall I've probably got about 15 or 16, which isn't a lot. I feel like if I was going to make a Criterion collection, I should get a handful more. But anyways, yeah, so that's all my, latest pickups and that. And yeah, so thank you very much for watching. And that's it. Cheers to Daisuke, and I'll catch you all later. And as he says, cheers!